So we did phase 0 yesterday. We laid the foundation, backend scaffolded, front end wired, and we tested that connection to make sure that everything was talking to each other. The bones are in place. Now the phase 1 starts, and this is where it gets even more real. We are opening VS Code and working straight from the implementation file, and we are building this help desk portal feature by feature. No skipping steps, no jumping ahead, just clean focused execution. With that said, let's jump right into phase 1. Cool. So now let's come back to our solution explorer and look at the implementation plan. And this is the implementation plan. Now we are done with phase 0. Phase 1 is about the domain and persistent. So now this is the place we'll be connecting our application to a database, which in our case is going to be Postgres. We'll be creating these repositories, adding a app data context, database context, and then creating this initial EF4 migrations. Now we'll touch base on a very important concept in Claude Code, that is the skills when we are actually doing the phase 1. All right, so let's come back to my Claude Code, and now because this is going to be a fresh phase and I don't really need anything from my previous context, so I'm going to do a clear context command. So now my context window is entirely clean. I'm not carrying any of the overheads of my implementation of the previous phase. Cool, pretty good. So I'm just going to say implement phase 1. Now if we look at the phase 1 one more time, it is going to also create an EF core migration. Okay, and then it is also going to seed a couple of sample tickets for local development. So these are two important things, and we'll look at this after it has done the basic coding. I'm going to hit enter now. Okay, now that we have asked Claude to do the implementation side of things, we can actually put in our time into something more useful. Now, setting up entity framework in a code is not what makes you a software engineer. Instead, deciding whether to use Postgres, whether to use SQL over Oracle. Now, these decisions actually make you a better software engineer. Setting up the repositories, writing the entity files are a repetitive and boring work. In the agentic era, we can of course devote this or delegate these kind of tasks to an AI agent, which in our case is the Claude Code over here. Okay, so now it is trying to do something with the Postgres and it is asking me for the Postgres password. Now I'm going to say yes to it, and it didn't really waited for me to enter the password. Okay, so now it is asking me how should I connect to your local Postgres SQL 18 to apply the migration and see data. So I'm going to say use the Postgres super user. All right, so now it requires the password, and that is why it is not able to move forward. So it is asking me to run this in the bash mode. So let us copy this and let's put this over here. It has come to bash mode, and where it says that you need to enter your Postgres password, I'm going to enter my password over there, the password that we created for our Postgres. 1234. That's it, and let's hit enter. So it says there is a syntax error. So this gave us a syntax error. Now I'm going to do this again and let's see. So I think it is waiting for some of our instructions now. Then I create it if needed and apply the migration. Okay. So I'm going to say the database does not exist. Please create it and apply the migrations. So now hopefully it should pick up the password. Yeah, it did. And now it is finally creating the database over here. Cool. I'm going to say yes to it again. Okay, so I think the phase 1 is complete and verified end to end. Here is what I built. Okay, so it has listed everything it has done. And before we look at all the changes that it has done, let us open pgAdmin, the tool that we installed yesterday, and let us see if we actually see a database over there. Okay, so the database has come. It is asking me for the password. And yes, so I see this help desk created over there. And inside the database we have got our help desk database. And if we look at the tables, so we have got a draft table, a ticket, and a users table. So let's look at what we have inside these table. Okay, so inside this table it has picked up my name, my role, and also my email from somewhere. Now it is because of all the memory that it has taken of me. And then let's also look at the tickets. So it has created 3 dummy tickets over here. I'm not sure how did it figured out these names, some random names it has picked up, and there is a state to each of these ticket. There is a time, and does the user has a role to it? Oh yes, so the role for the user is there, and what is there in the draft? And for the drafts also it has created some body and as also saying that this is AI generated. So this is the kind of thing that we wanted, right? For the drafts, it should auto create some summary for my user. Pretty good. Okay, so we are now back in VS Code. Our database is created, the tables are populated, but let's look at the changes that it has done. Okay, now this is my implementation plan and I think it has changed something. Okay, this is the difference view. Okay, so now it has added changes to my implementation plan also. Okay, pretty nice. Now let's look at what is there in the draft. So now this is a new entity class that it has created inside my entities folder. It has got a ID, ticket, body, and all those kind of things. Okay. Then we have a ticket class. We also have a users class, a category class, which is an enum, and these are the enums. Enum values for the category, account login, billing. Okay, so each ticket will have one of these categories, and then there is a ticket state, which is an enum, and it has two values. Okay, then enum for user role. Okay, and then there is my repository. Now let's look at this. So this is inside the helpdesk.core project. It has got a get by ID, get by message ID. List is saying that shall list all my tickets provided the state category. And then there is a interface method for adding a ticket and saving the state of the ticket. Okay. Then we have a user repository, pretty standard stuff. So now these are so generic that any one of us can create, right? So our time should not be devoted on these kind of repetitive tasks. Now there is a CS proj, infrastructure.cs proj, and let's look at the dependency that we have for this. Okay, so it is using this dependency of core. Cool. And if I look at my core CS proj, okay, so the core CS proj is not being mentioned over here. That means it has not changed. Nice. This is what we wanted, right? So there are a few errors over here, but Claude did build it. So let us build it one more time. Can you build the infrastructure project again? There are or there looks to be some build issues. Meanwhile it is building it, we can continue going through the code. So now this is my DB context and it has got three tables: tickets, draft, and users. Okay, and then there is this on model creating, which is going to apply the configuration from assembly. So we should have a few configuration classes here. The draft configuration. Okay, now this is the primary key for my for my draft table. And then this, if you look at this part of code over here, it says builder.has data, and then it is calling the seed data dot drafts. So we should have a seed data class that is this, and this is kind of seeding all of it. So this is how it is seeding the tickets. Then this is how it is seeding the drafts. But I don't really see. Okay, this is the user or the owner as it is calling it. Okay, let's go back to our DB context and let me close this first of all. Okay, now every time we change something, there is this method called apply timestamp, which is updating this property for ticket and user and also for the draft. Okay, nice. Then we have the app DB context factory, which is reading the environment variable for the help desk DB, and this is my default connection string over here. So localhost and the password is helpdesk. So now how is it actually figuring out the password? So this definitely is not our password, but if we look further down over here in the AppDB context, there's a connection string where it is saying that, okay, I'm going to read this environment variable called helpdesk_db. So now this is the place where my actual password is kept. The real connection string comes from an environment variable. So that helps us to keep the credentials out of the code. So that is pretty nice of Claude to think of. All right. Okay. What else? And then this is the seed data. We have already looked at it. Now this is the configuration for my draft. This is for the table for the ticket. And this also has got a primary key of ID. And then this is where the has data method is called, which is going to seed the tickets into my DB. User configuration is there. This also has a has data, which is going to seed the owner. Okay. And now this is the important part, which is about the migration. Now, so now this is all the usual stuff. It has got a up method which is actually creating, which is used to create the tables, and then similarly we should have a down method which is for dropping the tables. Now we have a designer class that is the snapshot of the model at the migration time, and this is used for figuring out the differences and those kind of things. Now this is entirely pretty usual stuff that every time you run an entity framework thing you would come across, and there are several videos on the YouTube and everywhere else where you can actually understand. But this video over here is not about understanding entity framework. So we'll quickly have a look and move ahead. And this is my build model, which is always going to reflect the latest migration state. Pretty nice, awesome. Now there are a few problems that I could locate here. Now the very first and the most important problem is that I don't really see the infrastructure dependency injection anywhere. So until unless we wire our program.cs with the infrastructure, even though the build is happening fine, nothing is going to work. So for sure Claude has missed it. Let's actually look at the program.cs because I don't really see it in the changes. So this is my program.cs and I don't see any DI thing for the infrastructure project. So let's tell Claude to add it. To say program.cs is missing the infrastructure struct dependency injection. So let's create a new class. Please create a new, let's just say, okay, let's give it in full DependencyInjection.cs in the helpdesk.infrastructure project. That should register the AppDbContext and my repositories, or just say and the repositories, and let's say as scoped services. And then it should also, after it has created my DI class, it should add the call to the AddInfrastructure in program.cs. Cool. Let's do this and let's see if it is able to create a DI class and then register those repositories and everything, all the wiring that it is supposed to do. Okay, so I think it did not do that because it says this is the phase 2 composition root work, and it will create the infrastructure extension, wire it into the program, and it is going to do it. Okay, so I think it did it right, but we didn't really read the implementation again. Okay, so now it has added it, and there's a build error, there's a compile time error. But anyways, Claude will build it itself and shall be able to recover from the failures. Okay, so now I think it has done it. Now it says here is what I added and the issue I caught along the way. This is what it created, this class over here, which is our dependency injection class. And yes, now it is registering all my repositories, also using this connection string over here. Okay. And let's go back to program.cs, and these are the changes it has done. So it is using this app settings.local.json file, and it is adding the infrastructure dependency over here, and now it is giving some error over here. Build is happening just fine. Now there, I don't know how this error will go, but hopefully after a restart of VS Code this should go away. Let's move forward with the other changes that it has done. Now this was the migration, we have looked at it. Okay, cool. So basically the wiring that it was supposed to do, I don't think it did it, and we prompted Claude again to do it and it did it for us. So now it's time that we actually test our application one more time. So I'm going to say run both the projects. Okay, so the front end is up, back end is up. Let's hit this URL and it's over here, just say /API/health. Let's send it. So yes, so this is working fine. Those errors that we just saw, I think it is some caching issue or something, and it's not really disturbing anything. Cool. Now there is actually one more problem, and that is, so it has added this seed data for us, right? Now seed data for tickets is fine if we are on a local development environment. Seed data for drafts is also fine for a local dev environment, and the user that it created, we want that to be present all the time, whether we are deploying it on the, on the production or something. I want a user that should be there, and I think that is fine for now. But definitely I do not really need the tickets and the drafts. Okay, so we are going to come back at it, but first of all let's commit this much. Okay, one more thing I want to show you before we actually commit this, and that is, so if we look at the core project over here and the CS proj, you see this core project has not got any dependency for the API and for the infrastructure. But if we look at the infrastructure CS proj file, we would see that core is being referenced over here. Now, this is a good thing that Claude has thought of. Dependencies are moving inwards. So the center of our project is the core, which contains all the domains, all the entities, and that is not dependent on anyone else. In fact, all my other things are dependent on this very core project over here. Now, this is a good thing that Claude has done. So finally, let's commit all the changes. Now let's come back to the problem that we were discussing, and that was around the seed data. Okay, so this data will be seeded whether or not it is a development environment or a production environment. I want this data to be seeded only when it is a development environment, right? So let's ask Claude to fix that for us. Only seed the tickets and drafts if in the development environment the user should always be, or the user or the owner, I think it is called over here, the owner user should however be seeded all the time. And maybe later down the line we will try to read the email and the display name, role, and all these kind of things somewhere from the config file. Okay, so it has done the changes and let's look at them now. So inside the Program.cs, it has now added this scope which gets the AppDbContext and then calls the development data seeder.seed async. What is this development data seeder? And it is just calling those seed data thing over here. And inside, if we look at this Program.cs, this part of code is only going to run when we are in the development environment. So this is what we wanted. And it is giving me some compile time errors, but so let us just build it ourselves. So it did build fine, determining projects, all projects up to date for restore, helper desk core, infrastructure, and the API. So it did build. For some reason this is showing me errors, but hopefully it will go away. Okay, so we are good for now, and it added the migration also. It ran the migration also. Pretty cool. Let's also have a look at the database and let's see if the data is not gone. Yeah, so data is there. We have the users and then we also have the tickets. Cool. Let's also commit this. All right. Now there is one important thing that we need to do now. So we are using the EF core migrations over here. Okay. Now whenever a domain model has changed or an entity or any of the DB context part has changed. Now when I say changed, I mean whenever one of it is added, removed or renamed, or a field's data type, its nullability capabilities, its maximum or minimum length, the indexing, or the relationship has changed, any of this change that is going to affect the database schema will have to run the migration, right? And we have seen Claude that it has missed wiring up our solution correctly. So there's a high chance that it might miss the migration also whenever we change a field, right? So let's create a skill that is going to run the EF core migrations for us. So for that, now I'm not going to write an entire prompt for creating this skill. Instead, we are going to ask Claude to do it. And how do we do that? So I'm going to first ask it if it knows about migration. I know it definitely knows, but if I ask it, it will definitely show me the entity framework core migration commands. And then we can build up our skill on that. So I'm going to say, do you know what is EF core migrations and when do we run it? Okay, let's just do this much and let's see what it comes up with. So my idea is that it should specifically tell me somewhere that a migration is needed only for schema affecting changes. So it has given me a detailed prompt. There's too much of text, but I could see the bullet points or the main points and it looks correct to me. So I'm going to say create a skill, create a EF core migration skill. Now inside the description of that skill, mention all the possible scenarios so that the skill can auto trigger whenever a migration worthy change is done. So we looked at a way to run the skill in one of our previous videos. So we were calling it using the slash and then the skill name, but that is not always the way to run the skill. So first build the skill and we'll see how we can run it. Okay, so it has created the skill and let's look at first of all where it has created it. So yeah, so now this is the perfect place it has created. If we recall what we learned in the first in one of our previous videos, that we created the skill and then we were changing the name ourselves, right? But this time it has created it at the perfect place. Now if we look at the description, it has mentioned all the possible scenarios that the skill should automatically trigger. Now, one way to trigger the skill was to use a slash command, but over here it has mentioned all the things in the description. So every time you do a change that is going to affect the DB schema, it is going to trigger this skill automatically. So now let us do this, or let us see this in action actually. Let's go to the configurations and let's look at the ticket configuration. And it says the sender email has a maximum length of 320 and is a required field. Now I'm going to change this that it should have a maximum length of 350 and that should trigger my entity framework migration. So let us do that. So let's change the sender email max length to 400. Now this change might not be required, but just to show you that the skill will trigger automatically. Okay, so the change is done, and if we go a little further up, so this was the prompt that we gave it: change the sender email max length to 400, and Claude was able to identify that this will change a persisted column's max length, and let me invoke the skill I just created to follow the project's migration flow, and the skill was very well loaded and the migration also happened. And if we look at this git changes, we could see the new migration that has come up. So this number over here is nothing but just a timestamp, and this is something the migration class that Claude has decided the name about. Cool. So let's just commit all of it, and before we commit, it should also have updated the DB. So let's look at that. Let's go to a pgAdmin, and for the tickets, if we expand this, and let me expand the columns, now the sender email is 400 characters. This is what we said, right? So the DB also has updated. Nice. Now let's just commit the changes. All right, so the commit also is done, and we are pretty much done with the phase 1 of our application. Let us just push the pending commit. Now it's better to choose the bash mode for git commands, but yes, we can of course use Claude, sacrifice a few tokens if we want. And yes, so all the 4 commits that we did for implementing phase 1 is pushed to GitHub. Cool. And that's phase 1 done. We went from a blank implementation file to an actual working code. Database is set up, schema defined, connections logged in. If you have been following along with phase 0, you can already see this thing taking shape. Phase 2 is coming and we are going deeper. OpenID Connect for authentication, and our UI is finally going to kick in next. Real screen, real components. This thing is about to start looking like an actual product. So make sure you subscribe, because that one is going to drop soon. If this helped you, please drop a like. It definitely helps the video to reach even more developers like us. And if you are building along with me, please tell me where are you at right now in the comment section. I read every single one of them. With that said, I'll see you in the next one.